We are recording and we are getting set to go live on Facebook. And so if you're joining us on our YouTube channel, thank you for finding us and listening to the recordings. We really appreciate that, and invite you to share comments, invite you to share suggestions or resources that you have that you would like us to address or mention. Please feel free, even if you're not joining us live, to still be a part of the conversation and to share within that YouTube space, and we will look forward to replying. I am going to add our title here. This is The Extrovert's Guide to COVID-19. And are we on episode 5?
I think
I
so.
think we
I think
are.
it started back in May.
Wow.
Yeah,
I love it.
Episode 5.
Know then grow continued. Okay. I think we're going. I'm adding in who's joining us today. Say hello in the comments, or whether you're live or whether on YouTube, say hello. Let us know that you're here. And we've just scratched the surface on this topic. So feel free to add your ideas. I've got our YouTube link in there. All right, we are going live.
Awesome. I'm looking for us to be able to do a viewing party on my Facebook. And so hopefully it shows up sometime soon. Get that going. There we go.
Are we there?
We are.
Yay. All right. Well, we've already welcomed those of you joining us on YouTube. We'd like to give a shout out of welcome to all of you joining us live this morning. This is the Extrovert's Guide to COVID-19, episode 5. Know Then Grow continued. I am Jen Hicks. I am the owner of Joyful Noises, an MT mentor, and there we go. I am on my page and you're on your page. I think we're getting this.
Yep.
So I'm a music therapy clinician and a supervisor and a mentor and a business owner. And I'm also a human being and an extrovert and an Enneagram 1 and a complicated woven together person, as my friend Grant said yesterday, that we're all just this woven together people. And that is me. Jen, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Jennifer Pinson. I am also a business owner and a music therapist, and I am about to launch, we'll talk more about this too, but I'm about to launch my new business, Career Driven Mom. And also I have a book where I'm co-authoring that comes out this year as well. So I'm super excited to be here with Jen talking about self-care and talking about extroverted things. So I'm an ENFP and an Enneagram 7, since you said you're Enneagram as well. So again, you know, the more you know, the more you grow.
The more you know,
so Jen,
yep.
So Jen and I talk a lot about some of our personality quizzes that we've taken, and knowing about our personalities and knowing kind of who we are and what some of our driving, factors are in terms of who we are as people. So as always, I'm super excited to have these conversations with you, Jen.
We are, and both of us believe strongly that knowing our why is important. As Jen said, knowing those driving forces. For me, knowing my core values. We're diving deep into that in MT Mentor this month, and it's something that has been a huge piece of how I have restructured my life. For those of you who know, I had a TIA in college and then had my central nervous system start to just kind of break down on me several years ago, and had to reevaluate my life a bit. And sustainable self-care and living and making decisions by my core values have really been the two biggest factors in helping me to, number one, be alive today, and to be healthy, and to live a life full of gratitude, really each and every day. And those core values is something that Jen and I have talked about, and those driving forces as we were looking about what to share with you all today. We are both extroverts. And one of the things we've shared in the past is that we really value meaningful connection. And so for us, it's not just enough to be with people. It needs to be those meaningful connections. And whether those are over Zoom like this, or whether those are in real life, we need to connect in meaningful ways. And with COVID-19, that has been a challenge for some of us. And so today, Jen and I wanted to start out by just sharing with you some of the ways that we are navigating those decisions and doing the best that we can in the midst of a global pandemic, to meet those needs and to care for not only our physical health, but also our mental and emotional and spiritual health. And that is something we both believe is important.
Yeah. So going back to one of the things you said too, before we kind of jump into these, is where you talk about your core values.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading a book a while back that talked about our own personal missions and visions.
Yeah.
And that was something that I got so much out of. And so what this book really talked about is that, you know, in our businesses, we talk so much about missions and visions, and we talk about our core values within our businesses, but we should really be focusing on those things too in our home lives and kind of what our missions are in terms of just people. And so, you know, I when I did mine, I felt like, you know, my business was a driving factor of, you know, helping others in the music therapy world. And that was something that really spoke to me and who I am as a human being as well, which has also been part of what's kind of prompted me into this career-driven mom, my new business that I'm launching. That it opens up opportunities to help even more people, and it opens up opportunities to work with you know, people that are kind of in this wheelhouse of, you know, the struggles that I have in my daily life, and the struggles that I've overcome, and the things that I've realized that were most important to me as being a business owner and being a single mom and being all of these things. And so I feel like even just those missions, that core value and our visions are really important in terms of who we are as humans and what are our driving factors that make us happy and make us feel good, make us feel like we're making an impact in our world.
Yeah. And help us to live in ways that are congruent with who we
Yeah.
are, and authentic with who we are. I will say, Kevin, because this has been a really interesting conversation that we've been having over on MT Mentor, which is the membership group that I have, as we've been discussing and diving into our core values a bit. And I think it's important to name, and this is something I want to give a shout out to Layla Saad, who wrote Me and White Supremacy. She has an entire chapter on our values in there. And one of the really important things I believe to keep in mind and in heart is that we also carry with us underlying subconscious core values because of the society in which we've been raised. And so for those of us who have been raised in a white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalist society, we carry with us many of those underlying core values. And so I know for me, one of those is this myth that productivity equals our worth.
Ooh, yes.
Right?
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
Anybody else out there struggle with that?
Oh, I feel like that like smacks me in the face a little bit. So, because
Sorry.
no, you're fine. I still feel like I fall into that a little bit too,
Yeah.
that my productivity, because even if I'm getting better about it, but go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, jump in. That's what this is for. And
Yeah.
it's something that has helped me to draw some boundaries around my work hours. It's something that's helped me to create more space in my life for my family and my friends, both virtually as well as in person, as well as my little family that my husband and dog and I have created. You know, it is understanding that that is actually not where our worth comes from.
You know,
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
One of the things early on when you and I first got connected together, it was back when we did that presentation together a few years ago. And I remember I was reading the E-Myth, and one of the things it talked about in the E-Myth was that you and your business were separate.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I had a really great conversation about that, because when I said that, your first thing was like, well, I'm just a single clinician working in my business. I don't have employees and all this other stuff. And, you know, at first, your first initial thing of hearing that was, you know, it was maybe off-putting in terms of that. But I think when we talk about productivity not defining who we are, also our success in terms of that doesn't necessarily define who we are. It doesn't necessarily define that sort of that place. So I feel like those two things go hand in hand. And I feel like as an early entrepreneur for myself, that was something I really struggled with. And it's still something that I struggle with, that, you know, sometimes I just have to put it down and say, you know, like, my mental health is important to me, and it's this business task doesn't get done today. It's okay. It'll be there tomorrow. And, you know, and I've gotten much better about setting the parameters and setting the boundaries that I have around work. Although it's been harder this year, because now I'm spending more time with my children, because my daughter gets out of school at 2:55. And one of my boundaries with my kids is not after school care for my daughter because it decreases exposure.
Yes.
And she doesn't ride the bus either. So I'm dropping both of my daughters off every single morning before I go to work. And I'm picking them up 4 days a week, and their dad picks them up one day. So, it's navigating all of this now of trying to redo my work schedule, because now my pickup time is 2:55 and 2:30 one day instead of 5:30 when they were in daycare. So I feel like for me, I'm reinventing my wheel as an entrepreneur and drawing even bigger boundaries, which has been really difficult, because it's like now my workload is much more with my kids. So it's creating this 6-hour workday for myself. And so I'm not getting to work until 8:30, 9 o'clock most days. And I have to go pick up my kid in that 2 o'clock hour. And so it's, working from kind of a 9 to 2. So really it's a 5-hour, give or take. So it's more challenging for me to get creative of when I work. And so,
yes.
so launching a new business right now feels like a really bad idea, but I'm doing it. And so, but it brings so much joy to me in certain aspects, but it's creating a harder workflow.
Yeah. And that self-awareness piece that you and I talk a lot about, of being mindful as we walk into the choices that we make and as we make those choices. And I'll invite those of you joining us, if there are some ways that you are finding to set boundaries in your life around your personal work, around your professional, around your personal life and professional work, or personal work if you have that too. What are some ways that you are finding it helpful to draw some boundaries, to create space in your life? And we know that there are some areas where we are very privileged to be able to draw some of the boundaries that we do. There have been times in my life where I've had to work weekends, and that just is what it is. And so I do want to acknowledge the privilege of being at a place where I can set aside some time that I don't work, and evenings for the most part when I can, of setting aside family time. One for my husband and I has been our mornings. He works Pacific hours. And so, and we're in Minnesota here in the central time zone. And so he doesn't start his workday until about 10 o'clock our time. And so we've loved our morning time together to do pack walks, to have breakfast out on the deck, to talk, to connect, to share about our days. That's become really an important time for us as a couple and us as a family to connect before we start our day. Similar to Jen, though, it means that, especially when I have our family Fam Jam Zoom calls at 4, my workday is 10 to 4. And after the Fam Jam, when my dog has his dinner, he says I'm done working, and he does not want me to be at my desk.
Don't tell that dog no.
It's great. He's like, your workday is done. Now is when we come over here and relax together. And so it's been really helpful for me to start to practice that as much as I can. And again, there's a spectrum here. One of the things Jen and I talk a lot about is that both of us are recovering perfectionists. And one of the big white supremacist core underlying values that we were talking about is that life is binary, right? That there's this right and wrong, and there's black and white, and it's very clear and distinct, when most things are a spectrum. When most things are much more complex and nuanced than that. That's not to say that there aren't some things that in my mind are just wrong. Racism being one of them. And it does mean that most situations that we walk into aren't that simple. And when we tend to judge ourselves based on this idea that there is a right and there is a wrong, it gets really complicated. And that applies both to how we try to navigate and create our lives and boundaries and our work and our family and our harmony, as Jen talks about. And it also comes to how we're navigating COVID-19. And one of the things Jen and I wanted to share with you a little bit is some of the ways that we as extroverts are trying to navigate creating space for those meaningful connections and finding ways to do that, not only electronically and digitally, but also in person. And I will just add the caveat that we are not medical experts on COVID-19. Do not take this as medical advice in any way. Both of us, as we talk about this, believe strongly that there is a spectrum. And on one end, there are lower risk, and on the other end is higher risk. And we're all doing our best to navigate our lives and to make decisions for ourselves and our families to keep us on that lower risk side as much as we can. And we know, again, it's complex and nuanced. And so I would just encourage those of you who are navigating those decisions, going back to school, teachers and students and families. There's a lot of those decisions happening right now. And there aren't easy answers. There aren't just one right, perfect answer out there. And for those of us that like to be perfect all the time and do the right thing, it can be really important to name that and give ourselves some grace and compassion, and also give grace and compassion to each other as we seek to navigate those decisions that we're making. Jen, do you want to talk a little bit about yours? Yeah.
Yeah, I think with school, with what you're saying though too, is that once you make the decision, know that you can, most opportunities, you can kind of change your decision if you know more information.
Yes.
But, you know, one of the things that I've talked to a close friend about is don't beat yourself up for whatever decision you make. So I, even for myself, I feel like I was at first, I was like, I'm going to homeschool. And then it's like the reality of me homeschooling is really hard. You know, not just being able to provide for my family, being able to have me time, being able to make sure that I'm, you know, taking care of myself in a way that I can still take care of my children. It didn't feel very practical for me. So I've been very happy with the way that our school's handling things. And I feel like the best decision for us is that my child goes to in-person learning. And I think that, you know, she's been doing a great job. I've felt very comfortable with the school. The school has been communicating very openly and honestly, and I feel really good about it. And so I feel like whatever decision that you make in terms of it, don't compare yourself to someone else. We've all, hopefully everyone has kind of heard, and if you have never heard it, comparison is the robber of joy. I compare myself. I found myself doing that the other day, and I had a friend who gave me the taste of my own medicine and said, Jennifer, comparison is a robber of joy. And it was like, huh, yeah, it is. I know. And so it is the robber of joy. And so you do you, and you do what's best for you and your family, and understand that what's best for you and your family might not be what's best for somebody else's family. And what is best for somebody else's family might not be what somebody else thinks that they should be doing. Mm-hmm. And that no matter what, there's also always going to be people who decide to judge other people, and their judgment should not be the dictator thing or the thing that's the driving force of your decision making.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, you know, and people judge for whatever reason. That's their choice to be that way, but that their choice to judge you should not drive your decision-making process.
Yeah. And as Jen said, we can continue to make the best decisions that we can now in the moment, and also as we learn more. I love that Maya Angelou quote, do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better.
Exactly.
There is so much we don't know right now about COVID-19. There's so much we're learning all the time. It is our job to stay knowledgeable, to keep learning, to do our best to have that information, and to make the best decisions that we can for ourselves, for our families. And I would also add there is that piece, again, we keep coming back to those grounding core values. One of the other ones that I have struggled with as a part of the society that I've grown up with in this white supremacist capitalist society is this whole idea of individualism versus collectivism. And so when I make my decisions, I am doing my best to make the best decision for me and for my family. And I'm also thinking about all y'all too, and thinking about our community. And so, you know, a lot of times we'll talk about in our family why we wear masks. And it's not just about keeping ourselves safe. You know, it's about keeping the people around us safe. For those of us who are music therapists or music therapy students, being mindful of the clients that we serve, being mindful of our colleagues. And so not simply making decisions for ourselves, but also having that wider lens of, yes, I need to be aware of what I need and my family needs and make the best decision for us. And we are interconnected.
Yeah.
And I think we forget that sometimes about how incredibly interconnected we are as human beings, and how much we affect each other, not just with our aerosols, right? But also with our words and our actions. You know, Jen and I have talked before about love languages, and one of mine is words of affirmation. Words are meaningful for me and they hold power. And so when we talk about those judgments that we make, especially when we don't know the situation, right? Being mindful that our words carry power, that we affect each other, not just with this virus, but we affect each other with our words. We affect each other with our judgments. We affect each other with compassion when we choose to spread compassion instead, when we choose to listen, and care for each other in whatever way we can.
With what you're talking about how we're all connected and how we impact, there's a book called The Five People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom, that there's a story in there where a little boy is outside playing, and something that happens impacts somebody else's life. And there's a quote in there that says that we're all connected and that our actions affect, it's a ripple effect.
Yes.
And I wish I could think of the exact quote, but it's something about, that we're all connected and you can't separate us from everybody, just like you can't separate the wind from like the air, or the breeze from the wind, or something along those lines is how the quote goes. I will find it and add it somewhere in our but it's such a meaningful quote, and you're absolutely right that when we are making decisions, we do have to make those decisions that are affecting our community and affecting those things. And so it's so important. So Jen, again, we're talking about all this connectedness and stuff, and when we're thinking about making our decisions and stuff, do you want to talk about the decision that you just made over the weekend, and how thoughtful you guys were in terms of that decision-making process that might help other people when making decisions? And again, this is where Jen was talking about, that we're not medical experts. We're just making decisions based on the knowledge that we have now. And if we have new knowledge here, we'll make better decisions or different decisions later with the new knowledge that we would have. But Jen and I have both been, navigating some stuff when it comes to potentially traveling during COVID-19.
Absolutely. And this comes back to understanding our need for connection. I've talked before about Dr. Vivek Murthy's book and work on loneliness, and how important it is and vital it is that we connect with each other. And I will say that there are ways to do that meaningfully, on Zoom and on the phone and through cards and whatever your love language might be. There are ways to be creative about this because it is about that meaningful connection. And so, for example, one of the things I've been working on when I'm on a Zoom call with someone is being fully present with them, and not trying to do all the multiple things that are at my desk at the same time, being really present with them. And we also know that there's something valuable about being together in person. And for those of us, and I believe this applies for many of us, Jen and I are both extroverts, and that's the perspective that we come from, one of our layers and one of our interwoven personality traits. I need those connections with people. And one of the things I want to just put out for there in the comments while I share this story is Jen mentioned those ripples and the ways that we affect each other. If you just want to give a shout out in the comments to someone who's made a difference in your life, I always think, spreading a little extra compassion and gratitude is a great way to start the day. So if you're listening right now and you want to add in the comments as I share a little bit about these meaningful connections, about someone who's been meaningful in your life, and just give a shout out of gratitude to someone who has made a little ripple, done something, it doesn't have to be big, but made your day, that would be awesome. We love to spread that gratitude and joy around. And so anyway, I highly value my relationships with my family. My dad was a pastor and we moved around a lot growing up. And so my sisters and I are really, really close. We are our only consistent friends throughout our lives. And we remain really, really close. They're my two best friends. And I haven't gotten to see them in a long time. One sister since Christmas and the other one since March when her daughter was up here in Minneapolis for a show choir competition. And we had planned last January to throw a 40th birthday party for my sister who turned 40 at the beginning of February. And there was a blizzard. And so we thought, no worries, we'll just do it the next time I'm able to get back to South Dakota where my family lives. Well, of course, there was a pandemic. And so I haven't been back. And so this last weekend, I traveled to South Dakota with my husband and our pup. And we were able to celebrate and spend some time with my family. And I will tell you that this was a trip that was at least a couple of months in the making. And it was something that we really intentionally planned so that all of us would feel comfortable with how we did it. And that required a lot of really vulnerable, courageous conversations. And I don't know about all y'all out there, but we're having to have these hard conversations, right? About what do you feel comfortable with and what feels safe to you. And so we had those really hard conversations, and we talked about what would be the best options for each thing we did to keep it on that low risk end of the spectrum. My parents both look incredibly young. I'm grateful for their genes. And yet they are in their 70s now. And so they fall into the vulnerable categories. My husband and I both have underlying health conditions that put us in those underlying health conditions as well that make us more vulnerable. The latest statistic we saw for my husband is that he would be 12 times more likely to die if he gets COVID. That we take very seriously. And so again, we're gathering knowledge. We're doing our best to learn more. And so what we ended up doing is we were able to do the trip in one shot. We didn't stop. We didn't pause. We just kept going right past go, so that we didn't have any stops along the way. And we did stay with my parents, but they had a room and a bathroom set aside for us. And anytime we were indoors with them, we always all had masks on and kept socially distanced and had the windows open and as much airflow as we could. And then we literally spent the vast majority of the weekend outdoors. They have a great screened-in porch and a huge outdoor backyard area with a gorgeous patio and fire pit. And so when my sisters and their kids would come over, we spent our time outdoors. And we really did our best, again, to socially distance. The adults and the teens wore masks. We did everything we could to continue to reduce the risk as much as possible, and to create the opportunities for connection. And it was challenging. There were parts of it that were hard. I would have loved to hug my family and snuggle up with them. And I also really value their health and well-being. And so there were some of those conversations that we were having even on the ride there of like, okay, when we get there, are we going to hug? Are we not going to hug? And we had looked up, how do you hug if you choose to hug? And we decided not to, just because of us being so vulnerable and my folks being vulnerable. But we had those tough conversations, and we weren't afraid to talk about it and plan it out in advance so that once we were there, we could just enjoy the time together. And that was really important for us. I did do one indoor thing. I have 7 nieces and nephews, and we do birthday dates for their birthdays every year. It's one of my favorite things to do. This year, I had decided initially that I was not going to do birthday dates. And the 3 youngest really, really wanted to go to Build-A-Bear. That was something I've done with them in the past. And so we decided to do it as a group date. And my sister came along, the 3 kids, and my sister and I all wore masks. We followed social distancing. And I will give a shout out to Build-A-Bear. They are trying hard to set things up in there so that we can stay socially distanced. And they were really doing the best they could. So we did have that one indoor. And then my older nieces and nephews were just gracious and kind and understanding about it enough. And so what I ended up doing instead of a birthday date is I made them a birthday book. And so I created, so much fun. I created a book about them and about our relationship from the time they were babies. And it included pictures of all of our past birthday dates and some of the commonalities and interests that we share. And that was so much fun to do. And so I got to give that to one niece and nephew this weekend, and the other niece and nephew have birthdays coming up later on this year that I'll get to share those. So we looked at options. And again, there wasn't one right or wrong answer. As Jen said, we're not medical experts here. We're just trying to share with you some of the ways that we're navigating all of the tough choices right now. And I will say the one thing that was really interesting to me, as some of you know, my family has been having a daily fam jam. And we did that for 5 months. We've now gone down, instead of daily, to 3 times a week as my sister and nieces and nephews are headed back to school. We're doing just 3 times a week now. But I will tell you, it was really neat that when we did get together, it didn't feel like we'd been apart.
That's
That
awesome.
those daily fam jams actually did make a difference. And we were caught up on each other's lives, and it just felt normal to be together. And so it wasn't a big deal to wear the masks. It wasn't a big deal to socially distance. We were just continuing that relationship. And again, we'd planned it in advance so that everybody felt comfortable. That way we could just enjoy the time together and not have to feel anxious or worry about what to do when and all of that sort of thing. So that's how we went about that decision-making process. I'm really grateful for that time with them, particularly because we don't know what this winter will look like. And so who knows when we get to the holidays if I'll be able to be there. But we got to have that time. And we isolated for the 2 weeks before, and we're isolating now for the 2 weeks after, again, to be safe, but doing the best we can. And I would just encourage all of you, as Jen and I have been talking about, to give yourself grace and compassion, and to give grace and compassion to each other as we all seek to just make the best decisions that we can, in this moment with what we know now. And then when we know better, to do better. Jen, do you want to
Absolutely.
share a little bit about your decision that you're in the process of making and living out too with your traveling?
Yeah, so I just want to add first that we've got Catherine Bender is with us and making some comments and stuff. And so
Oh,
thank you,
yay.
Catherine. She's a colleague of ours. And so, so she says one of the things earlier on, and I missed the comment, is that, and thank you for introducing yourself in the comment too, but she says that stop shooting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. I've actually had a friend the other day who used against me shoulda, woulda, coulda. He reminded me that I should not use shoulda, woulda, coulda as well, because that's one of the
Yeah.
things that I usually tell people too is we can't change the past. Shoulda, woulda, coulda is only going to prevent us from moving forward.
Yep. For
Um,
ourselves and for others, right? So don't should yourself. Also don't should other people.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. You're absolutely right that we should not. Um, and so she also talks, saying that, you know, COVID-19 demands on us to be aware of the hidden cultures and
Mm-hmm.
conditions through qualities of vulnerability. Who says some pre-existing conditions are quite often hidden. So I agree 100%
Yeah.
too about pre-existing conditions are often hidden. And so, so I do love some of the things that she's saying. And then when you were talking about, you know, people that have made an impact, she goes and lists a couple of our colleagues, Victoria Storm, who
Ah,
I know is in
yeah.
our region, and we both know. Kate Taylor, I adore Kate Taylor, and she put Kara Padden and Stephanie Solomon,
Yes. Yeah.
and so, so she listed a few of our colleagues as well that that I agree have made impacts in music therapy. So, and then she says, let's continue to defer to the wisdom of Mother Corona, who invites us to get outside and use air hugs. And so I agree.
Yes. Lots of
100%.
air hugs right now. My family and I actually came up with a whole, we have call it our TikTok dance, even though we're not on TikTok, that we do at the end of our fam jams. That's a whole little like hug routine, secret handshake thing we've got going on. I would show it to you, but it's a secret.
I love it.
Yeah, and please continue in the comments to share a shout out to someone who's made a difference in your life. We
Yeah.
want to be continuing to spread compassion and grace and gratitude in the midst of the grief and in the midst of all the losses and the challenges and the tough stuff. They can live together, which is something we've talked about before, of embracing that and holding the grief and the gratitude together with grace.
Yeah. So an impact for me, I would share with it would probably be my mom. So I feel like my mom has always taught me to just work really hard. And, you know, my mom has always been somebody that I've seen work really hard for our family. And my mom is also somebody who puts a lot of people before herself at times. And I always, you know, acknowledge the fact that she should engage in more self-care at times. But I've always feel like my mom is a very selfless individual. Um, but so in terms of my travel stuff, kind of going along with what Jen's talking about, I have an upcoming trip in October that that I had already paid for, kind of prior to COVID stuff. My airfare I did get while after post-COVID stuff, not knowing it was pretty early on in COVID-19 that I went ahead and got my airfare when it was kind of cheap, and I I wasn't sure what I would be doing, so I did buy a refundable ticket, but my stuff in Mexico is non-refundable as long as Mexico does not have a travel restriction. So if travel restrictions come, then at that point it would be refundable. So I was talking to Jen about kind of navigating some of this feelings of, do I go on this trip? Do I not? The trip is for the co-authors of the book that I'm co-authoring. It's me and all of the other women who are co-authors in that book are going to a trip to Mexico right before the book launches. And so there's some professional things that are happening there, and also just some celebration and all of us kind of coming together. Many of the women I haven't even met in person, so it's a great opportunity for me to meet some of the co-authors as well. And it's just, it sounds like, I mean, it's going to be an amazing trip. So obviously with COVID, there comes that level of, you know, kind of concern about traveling at this time. And so, and then the other thing, and I don't know if I even mentioned this, Jen, is the following week is my kids' fall break. So I'm also kind of navigating, you know, how do I do this and then also still enjoy the time with my kids during fall break.
Mm-hmm.
So, so as I was talking to Jen about it, you know, I feel like right now We're not hearing about a lot of COVID stuff with airplanes. So I feel like airlines are doing a good job of even just requesting everyone to wear face masks and trying to keep it as safe as possible. I went ahead and bought a first class ticket just so that way I could board the plane towards the end, and then also be one of the first ones off to limit exposure and contact with people as they're walking on the airplane. And I'm trying to make as many good decisions as I can. I have my own room when we get to the resort, and there would be a lot of social distancing happening. And so I am feeling pretty good about it, and I feel like that that I'm being smart and trying to minimize as much exposure as I can. And then when I get back, I figured that as long as I socially distance with just my children, that I could kind of navigate even when I get back, of keeping everybody safe, or not exposing myself to other people other than my children, who I would need to expose myself to. Because I can't imagine being away from them for 3 weeks. So I do feel like that kind of has to happen. So again, I think I told Jen that if I make the other decision to not go, I don't have to make that decision today. Really, I have to make that decision in the morning of October 5th when I would board that airplane. And so the outcome would be the same if I walked away today or if I walked away then, unless there's a travel restriction. So I also am giving myself lots of grace to not stress about it so much right now, but also to get myself really prepared for it, to make sure that I am doing things as safely as possible. So, when we talk about things, or when we talk about, fall break, when we talk about the holidays and we start thinking about this, it's not going away. It's really thinking through this. How can I keep myself safe? How can I keep other people safe? How can I make sure that things are happening in the way that they need to happen? And so, we're not telling you to travel. We're not necessarily saying what you should and shouldn't do, but we're both just trying to make a point that, this is something that we both feel like we kind of need, in a sense, that we need that human connection. We kind of need these things. I don't necessarily, if I didn't go to Mexico, I would be fine, but I also feel like it would be a really big missed opportunity for me. And I feel like too, that it would be nice just to kind of have that break as well. Just because life is crazy for everyone. And so I do feel like, giving yourself that grace, and also acknowledging the fact that we can do it in a way that we are very prepared and we are keeping ourselves as safe as possible. And so, as I think about the traveling, and when I think about stuff, I also realize that, I am there's a lot of risks in the day-to-day operation that I do, with coming to my office and seeing clients and working here and doing this and doing that. There's also there's risk there as well. And so I always like to think about risk versus reward. And I think when I think about going to this Mexico trip, I am very, very mindful of what the risks are, what the rewards are, and kind of what that looks like in my day-to-day life. So I think when you are making decisions, again, what we've been talking about throughout this entire episode is that you have to make the decisions that are best for you, but then also what's the best for your community, and realizing, kind of where you fit into that.
And making those decisions, because we know that we're all navigating them right now, understanding there's a lot of complexity, there's nuance. It's not an easy right or wrong choice often. And so just giving yourself the grace to do the best that you can. And we would encourage you to do that from a place of self-awareness, and to do that from a place of really knowing your why. My core values are grounded in the connection with my family. That's a big piece of my core values. My health is also one of my core values. So how do I navigate both of those? My wellness is a piece of that health, and that's not just physical. And so when you look at your why, being mindful of how to meet those needs at the same time as doing so in a way that's as safe as possible for you and for those around you. And Jen and I both believe, as we talked about earlier, in really having our core values, which lead us to our mission and our vision, having those be the guiding principle for not only our personal lives, but also for our work. And because of that, and because of the pivoting that we're doing and evolving we're doing in the midst of COVID-19 as professionals, we have some exciting new things to share with you today. Jen, do you want to go first?
It doesn't matter. So I am going to launch in September of 2020 my podcast, Career Driven Mom. So yeah, it's all in editing phases right now, and should hopefully, the goal is to get it out next week. So you'll be able to find it on any place that you're streaming your platform, or anywhere that you're streaming your podcasts. So I've got some really great guests already lined up for Career Driven Moms. So with Career Driven Mom, it is for moms looking for harmony in their lives. So I see harmony as this multi-layered. If you're a musician, you know you cannot create harmony alone. And so it goes through talking about who are our community and how are we using community and how are we using other people to help us feel like we're living harmonious lives. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about, one of the things that came to mind earlier was even this life right now of working with, being with kids a lot. It's so hard. I used to work a lot at home with my kids, and I feel like at that point I was more of a snippy mom because it'd be like, oh, you're interrupting my work or whatever, that sort of thing. And so I really started having to be very mindful of work time versus, but I also understand right now with like kids being at home that that might not be possible. So I always talk a lot about quality versus quantity and times that we're spending with our kids, and making sure that we're focusing on that quality time versus that quantity time, and giving yourself the grace if you have to rely on the TV a little bit more, or you have to do the things that you're giving your kid a coloring book and sitting at the table, and you're not necessarily spending as much quantity of time, but being mindful of quality time. So a lot of these conversations are conversations that I want to be having over at Career Driven Mom. How are we balancing our career? How are we balancing and finding harmony in those things? How are we making those how are we, honing in on the priorities that we have in our lives? How are we looking at just even our priority and thinking about how those things all come together? So with Career Driven Mom, it's not necessarily focused on work so much, but figuring out how to balance it all and how to find that harmonious life, having great conversations with wonderful career-driven moms. And then I also have a Facebook group as well that you can come and join for free and be able to have the conversations about setting goals and giving yourself grace and celebrating the small successes.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I'm so excited about
Yeah.
that.
I'm excited about it too. I love these conversations. But I am loving your MT mentor. So let's hear all about it.
So fun. And this is one of those neat things when we talk about the crucial conversations that we have with people. When Jen and I first started this Extroverted Jen's live thing, and a shout out to Amy Marie Tippy, who I think was the first person who coined the whole Extroverted Gens after our conference, the mini conference on resiliency with music therapy ed, when Jen and I both presented and talked about that. So shout out to our music therapy ed leaders, friends. Yay. And when we started talking and exploring where our core values are and the things that we're passionate about, part of what we realized is that we love these conversations and our areas of passion are different. So when we talked about, do we start a podcast together? We were like, I want to go in this direction and I want to go in this direction. And that's awesome. And I think that's one of the pieces I was just reading about recently, about understanding that creating a sense of connection and community isn't about us all being the same, right? It's about valuing the differences and seeing them and caring about the people because they are who they are. And connection and community are a couple of my core values, along with education and service. And I've always loved mentoring. Last month, I got to share with you the launch of my MT Mentor membership program. And that has been such a joy. Last month, we explored sustainable self-care. This month, we're diving deep into those core values. And so if you are a music therapy student or music therapy professional listening and you'd like to know more, I will put that link in the chat here in just a moment. And the MT Mentor membership program comes with monthly content, a webinar that you can get a CMTE for if you're a professional, along with the board domains, references, reflection pages, graphics and infographics. And then we have office hours with me every week, peer supervision groups that have been amazing. One of our group members compared watching, because we record it so the members who can't join us for the peer supervision group can still watch. And one of the members who hasn't been able to join us for the group yet shared it's their favorite reality show every week to see what we talk about in the peer supervision group. And I loved that. It is the reality of being a music therapist. And we have a separate group for students too. That is so awesome. We've just been having these amazing deep conversations in both the student and professional groups that I've been just honored to be a part of. It's that feeling, if you're a music therapist out there, of creating the space and then seeing how people just embrace it. And the courage and vulnerability that people are showing has just amazed me and honored me to be a part of it. So that's the MT Mentor membership group. As of today, we are also launching our MT Mentor podcast, and the trailer is live on Apple and Spotify, as well as on YouTube. So I'm going to put in the comments all of those links for the membership group, as well as the direct link for Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And it's also available some other places, but those are the big ones. You can check out the trailer and then go ahead and subscribe today so that you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. My tagline for the membership group and for this podcast is based around filling our cups and sharing our wisdom. And that's so that play on MT Mentor, that MT is intentional, meaning both music therapy, but also the need to fill our empty cups. And so the podcast will be a space where I will be able to interview a variety of mentors in the field of music therapy with different areas of wisdom and expertise. If you're familiar with the book Tribe of Mentors, I'm using a similar format in that I have specific questions that I'll ask everybody who comes on the podcast. And so we'll get to learn a little bit more about them. And then there'll be some specific questions geared towards their areas of expertise. I was realizing, again, I love connection. I love sharing wisdom. Those are all really grounded in my core values. And I've also been in this field for a while. So there's some advantages to being old and knowing a lot of people and being aware of some of the diverse areas of wisdom and expertise in our field that I am so excited to share on a broader scale and amplify some voices in our field that might not always be amplified. And so later on, I will be posting as well down the road a place where you can suggest guests for that podcast too. I've got a Google form that you can fill out if there's people that you think I should interview that are mentors to you in the field of music therapy. So that all will be coming up. But go ahead and subscribe today to that podcast and check out the membership group if you're a music therapy student or professional. And I'll look forward to seeing you there. Anything else, Jen, you want to share as we finish up today?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back. I think the first Thursday in October is October 1st.
It is. I did quick check when you mentioned your date that you're leaving for Mexico to make sure that we would still get to do our Extrovert Gens in October.
Already looked.
I love it.
Going to be bringing it in from Mexico, but I looked, and so I was like, yes. So I'll actually be doing 2 presentations that day. So I'll be with you, and then I have a presentation that evening for some EMTA stuff. So.
Awesome. All right. Well, we are so honored that you would join us today, whether you're joining us live or whether you're listening on our YouTube channel. We do have a YouTube playlist for the Extroverted Gens. If you've not already subscribed and followed us there, I'll go ahead and put that link in the comments again. It is also in the body of the post. And so please feel free to check us out over on YouTube as well if you miss any of our episodes. And know that we thoroughly enjoy these conversations with each other. If no one else listened, I know I learn a lot each time that we speak, and Jen does as well. And that's part of what we'd encourage is reach out and have conversations with people. Get to know yourself better. Get to know other people better. At least for me, one of the ways that I learn more about me is by learning more about you. And that helps me grow and learn. And every time that I'm able to be present with and listen to other people and their perspectives on the world, there's something new that I learn. And so I'm grateful for that opportunity to learn from you, Jen, and for all of you who chose to join us today. My final request would be, as we talked about those ripples earlier, we need to think about our community, not just in terms of how we spread aerosols, but as we've been talking about how we spread those ripples of gratitude. And so if I could have a wish or an action step for you today, it would be to reach out to someone and thank them today. Someone who's made a difference in your life. Share a little gratitude today. Spread that along with hopefully the lack of spreading of aerosols, but spread some gratitude today.
I love it. I love it so much. Thank you so much, Jen, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys next time.
See you in October. Take care, everyone.